Satoru Gojo is the undisputed strongest sorcerer of the modern era, and the first in 400 years to inherit both the Limitless and Six Eyes. But, despite his overwhelming power, Gojo actually failed at something big. So hold on tight, because starting with Satoru Gojo, I'll explain every special grade sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen. And by the end, I'll introduce one mysterious sorcerer who had the potential to join their ranks but never quite fit into this category. Gojo was the strongest sorcerer alive. Well, at least when he was alive, and his abilities made him literally untouchable. His insane power came from a mix of his inherited curse technique, Limitless, and his unique physical trait, Six Eyes. Six Eyes isn't just a technique, but a rare genetic trait exclusive to the Gojo clan. It lets Gojo see cursed energy with extreme precision, allowing him to use barely any energy while activating his techniques. This also helps him analyze an opponent's movements instantly. The problem is that this overwhelming perception is exhausting, even for Gojo. That's exactly why he started wearing a blindfold, even though back in his high school days, he rocked sunglasses more often. It helps him limit the insane amount of information his brain has to process. Then we have Limitless, the broken inherited technique that gives Gojo absolute control over space. Its most fundamental ability is Infinity, which basically creates an invisible barrier that slows anything coming toward him to the point where it never reaches him. It might look like you're touching Gojo, but in reality, you're just touching the infinity between you and him. Remember the moment when Jogo tried to hold Gojo's hand? Yeah, that's Infinity doing its thing. Jogo's hand just kept slowing down the closer it got. But Gojo doesn't just stop at Infinity. Limitless also gives him 3 of the most broken abilities in Jujutsu Kaisen: Blue, Red, and Hollow Purple. Blue has the power to attract, and it enhances the attraction force of Infinity, meaning it can pull in everything around it with immense force. When Gojo activated this with maximum output against Toji, it crushed the surroundings into small debris and became kinda like a small black hole. Red, on the other hand, has the power to repel. It creates a repelling force that violently pushes objects away. This skill can literally blast a target away. But it is also one of the many reasons why Gojo got this reputation that he's better at battling alone. Anyone who fights alongside him will just be a burden. In fact, the curse technique reversal output of Red uses twice as much cursed energy as Blue. When Blue and Red are combined, the power of motion and reversal collide, creating an imaginary mass that forms the hollow technique, Purple. This devastating attack erases everything in its path and deals serious damage. Gojo's scariest ability is his domain expansion, Unlimited Void. This technique traps opponents in an endless space filled with infinite information, completely overwhelming them. It might look like they can't see or feel anything, but the truth is they're actually seeing and feeling everything at once. The sheer overload shuts down their brain, making them completely helpless and unable to move. Throughout the series, Gojo used this ability at crucial moments. At one point, he activated it for just 0.02 seconds, and later, in his fight against Sukuna, he managed to shrink it down to the size of a basketball. Gojo is insanely talented in so many things. For example, he quickly learned Simple Domain, even though he said he couldn't do it. What he really meant was that he never needed it in most of his fights. Against Sukuna though, he definitely had to use it. The thing is, Gojo is so much of a genius that he's actually terrible at teaching Simple Domain to others. He's also capable of using another anti-domain technique called Falling Blossom Emotion. This is a secret technique from the big 3 sorcerer families that cancels out a domain's sure hit effect as soon as it makes contact. Against Sukuna, it wasn't strong enough to block all the damage from the Malevolent Shrine, but it still helped weaken the attack. Spoiler alert, at the end of the fight, Gojo couldn't keep up and fell way sooner than any of his fans expected. But enough about his powers. You see, Gojo isn't just feared by curses, but also by the higher-ups at Jujutsu Headquarters. He's so powerful that he's basically the one keeping the balance between curses and sorcerers. But he absolutely hates the old-fashioned higher-ups and thinks the whole system needs to change. That's why he's dedicated to training strong sorcerers and even took a chance on Yuji despite the huge risk of Sukuna taking over his body. And it's not just Yuji. Gojo was so influential that he even stopped Yuta's execution. He was so confident in his own strength that he knew if things got out of hand, he could just handle it himself. In fact, before his fight with Sukuna, Gojo actually wiped out the Jujutsu higher-ups he despised. But Gojo isn't someone who's vulnerable to his own emotions. Sure, when Riko Amanai died, he didn't really get angry or feel the need for revenge. But when his best friend Geto was defeated by Yuta in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, he just couldn't bring himself to destroy Geto's body. And because of that moment of hesitation, Kenjaku was able to take over Geto's body and use his curse technique. Yuki Tsukumo is one of the few special grade sorcerers out there, but she's far from what you'd expect. A lot of people see her as a lazy slacker who dodges responsibilities, ignores Jujutsu Headquarters, and just wanders the world doing whatever she wants. But what most don't realize is that Yuki isn't just some carefree freeloader. She actually has a vision that's way bigger than just fighting curses. While Jujutsu High is busy taking out curses as they appear, Yuki sees that as nothing more than putting a band-aid on a much bigger problem. To her, wiping out curses one by one is pointless if their source is still around. She wants to go straight to the root cause and create a world where curses don't exist at all. That's why she and Jujutsu High don't exactly get along. Her curse technique, Star Rage, lets her add virtual mass to herself and her Shikigami, Garuda. And Garuda isn't just a curse tool, it's a full-on battle partner that fights alongside her. With Star Rage, Yuki's punches hit like meteors, and Garuda's attacks are strong enough to take down even special grade curses. What's more, there's no limit to how much mass Yuki can add to the Star Rage. If she pushes it far enough, she can literally create a black hole. More on that in a second. Yuki also has a simple domain and a domain expansion, but she chose not to use her domain against Kenjaku. She learned from Tengen that he could erase it instantly, so instead of wasting energy, she fought him in a way he wouldn't expect. Yuki's big question in life is why do sorcerers keep fighting an endless war against curses instead of fixing the root cause, the existence of cursed energy itself? That's why she travels the world, searching for a real solution. And this mindset led to one of the most important conversations in Jujutsu Kaisen history, her talk with Geto. She teaches him one simple but dangerous question: how do you think curses should be eradicated? She admitted that wiping out all non-sorcerers would technically work, but she made it clear she wasn't crazy enough to go that far. But even though she never intended it, that question planted an idea in Geto's mind. One that eventually pushed him toward believing that the only way to end suffering was to eliminate non-sorcerers entirely. During the Colon game, Yuki fought alongside Choso to protect Tengen and take down Kenjaku. At first, she and Choso were just allies out of convenience, but she quickly grew to respect him, especially his devotion to his brothers. When he was ready to throw his life away in battle, Yuki stopped him and told him to live on as a human instead. She even took things into her own hands and sacrificed herself for him, jokingly calling him Big Brother at one point. Even in her final moments, Yuki had one last move up her sleeve. She turned herself into a black hole in a last-ditch effort to take Kenjaku down with her. Unfortunately, Kenjaku barely survived thanks to his anti-gravity technique, but it definitely had him sweating. On top of all that, Yuki is strongly against the merger with Tengen. She actually hates Tengen for refusing to merge, believing it was the most logical way to avoid the risk of their body resetting and evolving into something uncontrollable. As a former Star Plasma vessel herself, she can hear the voices of the past vessels inside Tengen, but she refuses to share what they say. In her own words, she sees it as her responsibility to make Tengen's life harder. She even admits that if the Star religious group had chosen to protect the Star Plasma vessel instead of assassinating them, she would have sided with them. Suguru Geto wasn't always the villain we know him as. Back in his Jujutsu High days, he was one of the strongest sorcerers around, fighting alongside Gojo and even earning the rare title of Special Grade. He had the skills and the talent, and for a while, he believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Geto's weapon was a 3-section staff called Playful Cloud, but his real power came from his technique, Cursed Spirit Manipulation. This let him absorb and control curses by turning them into small black orbs, which yeah, he had to eat to use their abilities. He could even steal curses from other sorcerers as long as he took out their master first. And if a curse was 2 or more grades below him, he could absorb it with 0 consequences. And these curses weren't just mindless monsters. Some of them could use their innate domains or even full-blown domain expansions. And since Geto could control an army of them at once, his technique was all about overwhelming his enemies with massive numbers advantage. He could unleash every curse he had in one massive attack, and it was pure chaos. Even Kenjaku admitted that if Geto hadn't split his forces between Shinjuku and Kyoto to keep other sorcerers busy, he probably would have beaten Yuta. And then there was Uzumaki, his ultimate move. This technique fused thousands of curses into one ridiculously strong attack, which he used in his fight against Yuta and Rika. Interestingly, Geto actually used to believe that sorcerers existed to protect regular people, even if it meant putting himself in danger. Funny enough, this put him at odds with Gojo, who didn't really care about being a hero at the time. But eventually, their roles flipped. Everything changed after Riko Amanai's death. Seeing the Star religious group celebrate her murder shook him to his core. He held back from killing him, but the damage was done. Day after day, he kept exercising curses and protecting people who couldn't defend themselves. But the more he did it, the more he started questioning why. Were non-sorcerers even worth saving? Then came his conversation with Yuki Tsukumo, and that's when the cracks really started to show. She challenged the way he thought about the world, and from that moment on, his ideals took a dark turn. By the time we see him in Jujutsu Kaisen 0, Geto has completely changed. He started calling non-sorcerers monkeys, seeing them as weak and unworthy. In his mind, the only way to create a perfect world was to get rid of all non-sorcerers. His breaking point came after Yu Haibara's death. But the final straw happens during a mission where he finds 2 little girls, later introduced as Nanako and Mimiko, being abused by their village just because they have sorcerer abilities. That was it. He snapped. He slaughtered all 112 villagers and took the girls with him, officially becoming a wanted criminal sentenced to execution. From there, Geto built a following of curse users and created a religious organization to gather resources and curses for his grand plan. He launched a large-scale attack on Jujutsu High, later known as the Night Parade of 100 Demons, but that was just a distraction. His real goal was to kill Yuta and take Rika for himself. But despite everything, a part of the old Geto never fully disappeared. In his final moments, when confronted by Gojo, he admitted that he simply could not be happy in the world no matter what, while thinking of their time at Jujutsu High. Real quick, before we dive into Kenjaku and break down the Jujutsu Sorcerers whose strength rivals or even surpasses special grades, if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to stick around until the end and hit that like and subscribe button. Alright, let's tap into the domain of the strongest sorcerers. When Geto died, there was one curse user who used his curse technique to occupy his body. This allowed him to use curse spirit manipulation for his plans too. We're talking about Kenjaku. Kenjaku is one of the most dangerous villains in Jujutsu Kaisen. He's been alive for over 1,000 years by swapping bodies using his innate technique. By transplanting his brain into a new body, he not only takes control of it, but also gains its curse techniques and memories. Over the centuries, he's taken over many people, and we'll go through them in a bit. One of the most infamous people he possessed was Noritoshi Kamo, the Jujutsu sorcerer who created the cursed womb, Death Paintings. In fact, Kamo was known as the most evil sorcerer in history and a stain on the Kamo family. About 400 years ago, Kenjaku also took over another sorcerer's body and used it to make binding vows with past sorcerers to prepare for the Culling Game. Hajime Kashimo was one of the people he made a deal with. He also took over Kaori Itadori, Yuji's mother, just to make sure Yuji would be born as Sukuna's perfect vessel. Then there was Geto, and I'm pretty sure his curse spirit manipulation technique was definitely what caught Kenjaku's attention. Kenjaku is a manipulator on another level, even more twisted than Makima. He doesn't use fear or threats. Instead, he makes people believe they're acting in their own best interest. He convinced Sukuna to split his soul into cursed objects, tricked the US military into invading Japan, and got countless sorcerers to join the Culling Game by offering them a chance at rebirth. He even teamed up with Mahito's group, but the moment Mahito was weakened, Kenjaku absorbed him without hesitation. He even found it a shame that he didn't get to absorb Jogo. Kenjaku's ultimate goal is to push the limits of cursed energy, but the scary part is that he treats the whole thing like it's a fun experiment. He wants to merge all non-sorcerers in Japan with Tengen and see what happens. He guesses it might turn into a cursed spirit with the energy of 100 million people, or something similar to Uzumaki, a cursed spirit he can extract techniques. He even jokes that the result could be a goofy clown face, and that would still amuse him. Just the thought of it makes him feel like a kid with a crayon and a blank sheet of paper. As a sorcerer who has been around for 1,000 years, Kenjaku's jujutsu skills are nearly unmatched. He's second only to Tengen when it comes to barrier techniques, and is one of the few who can expand a domain without fully enclosing it. Now that he has Geto's body, he commands an army of cursed spirits strong enough to wipe out entire nations. He even has a technique to turn sorcerers into cursed objects after death, something that not even Sukuna understood in his prime. Thanks to his cursed technique, Kenjaku has access to a ton of abilities. His brain transplant lets him switch bodies and grants him every technique of his past hosts, though there is a limit to what he can store. With cursed spirit manipulation, he can absorb and control cursed spirits, including powerful ones like the smallpox deity. His maximum, Uzumaki, condenses multiple curses into a single devastating attack. Even low-grade curses can become deadly if he enhances them with cursed energy and orders them to swarm an opponent. After absorbing Mahito, he also gained Idol Transfiguration, which he used to set up the Culling Game. By taking over Tengen, who had evolved into more of a cursed being than a human, he created the Culling Game's colonies and made binding vows that even forced Jujutsu High to participate. He also inherited the anti-gravity system from Kaori Itadori, which helped him survive the self-destructing black hole Yuki created. His domain expansion, Womb Perfusion, is an open barrier domain like Malevolent Shrine, and it was powerful enough to severely injure Yuki. The thing is, there are many convincing theories that Womb Perfusion actually belongs to Geto or even Kaori. But in my video about every domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen, I debunk and break down these claims. If you want to learn more about Womb Perfusion, go check it out. Going back, Kenjaku also had high strategic brilliance, which was something we saw when he faced Fumihiko Takeba. You see, Takeba's unpredictable and goofy techniques defied all logic, and Kenjaku saw them as dangerous. He needs to keep his guard up because Takeba can just put his 1,000 years of Jujutsu knowledge and experience to waste. Eventually, he figured out that Takeba's power ran on confidence, so he played along and engaged in a full-on comedy battle to break his focus. In the end, he realizes that all he has to do is help Takeba live out his comedian dream. Their duo act was something even Kenjaku enjoyed until the very end. Even in death, Kenjaku's schemes continue. You see, even after Yuta slashed him, he had already put a failsafe in place. Kenjaku transferred the authority to activate the Great Merger to either Megami or Sukuna, ensuring his plan could continue. Yuta Okkotsu is one of the 4 officially recognized special grade sorcerers, alongside with Gojo, Yuki, and Geto. At first, people saw him as a special grade cursed human because of Rika, but Yuta is an incredibly strong Jujutsu sorcerer with a variety of curse techniques that make him worthy of his title. Starting off with Rika, the cursed spirit, also known as the Queen of Curses, who remained with Yuta after his childhood friend Rika passed away. Rika acts as an external storage for Yuta's copied curse techniques and cursed tools. Rika can act independently and react to threats on her own, no matter if it's following whatever Yuta orders or performing some side quests from far away. When fully manifested through his ring, Rika gains access to her cursed energy and the ability to wield cursed tools she stores for him. Only when Yuta is connected through Rika can he use cursed techniques, fully manifest Rika, or obtain Rika's cursed energy for himself. Maintaining this state lasts for 5 minutes at a time. One of Yuta's most interesting abilities is Copy, which lets him use other people's techniques by having Rika consume a part of their body. The stronger the technique, the more important the body part needs to be. Thanks to this power, Yuta has copied abilities like Toge Inumaki's Cursed Speech, Drill of Lakadawa's Shikigami, Takaku Uro's Sky Manipulation, and even maximum output Jacob's Ladder. In his fight against Sukuna, he even used Shrine. After fighting Sukuna, Yuta pulled off one of the craziest things ever. By using Copy, he was able to replicate Kenjaku's brain transplant. This allowed him to take over Gojo's body and use his techniques, including domain expansion. He gained Limitless, Blue, and even Hollow Purple. However, since Yuta wasn't experienced with Gojo's abilities, his attack ended up destroying his own domain's barrier. Now, aside from Unlimited Void, which he only used thanks to Kenjaku's technique, Yuta has his own domain expansion, Authentic Mutual Love. When activated, this domain creates a battlefield filled with cross-like structures and countless katanas wrapped in ropes. With this, Yuta can choose any one of his copy techniques as the domain's sure-hit effect. These techniques are scattered randomly among the katanas inside the domain. Each katana can only be used once, but there are an infinite number of them. Although only Yuta can use them, he won't know which ability a katana has until he grabs one. Yuta's cursed energy reserves are so massive that they actually surpass Gojo's. This is because he's a distant relative of Michizane Sugawara, one of history's most powerful sorcerers. This also makes him a distant relative of Gojo. When Yuta first awakened his cursed energy, he accidentally cursed Rika, turning her into a vengeful spirit known as the Queen of Curses. At first, Yuta believed he was the one cursed by Rika, but he later learned it was the other way around. Even after Rika's soul was freed and she was finally able to rest, Yuta retained his enormous reserves of cursed energy. He can still summon Rika, but it's not the same one we saw in Jujutsu Kaisen 0. After training overseas with Miguel following the night parade of 100 demons, Yuta returned to Japan after the Shibuya incident. He was given the mission of executing Yuji, and Yuta? He was cold enough to follow orders. It didn't matter that he was Gojo's student. He cut off Inumaki's arm in Shibuya, and that was all he needed to justify his actions. But in reality, it was all an act. Gojo had asked Yuta to protect his students in case something happened to him, especially Yuji, who was also sentenced to execution. Yuta went through with killing Yuji because of a binding vow that allowed him to become his executioner. But right after, he instantly revived Yuji using the reverse curse technique. Speaking of revival, after Sukuna's defeat, Yuta, who was inside Gojo's body due to Kenjaku's brain transplant, somehow managed to survive and return to his own body. Originally, when he used the brain transplant technique, there was only 3 possible outcomes, 2 of them leading to death and the third leaving him stuck in Gojo's body forever. There was no mention of a way for him to go back. However, thanks to Rika continuously using the reverse curse technique to maintain his body, their connection wasn't severed and he was able to return. Ryomen Sukuna is the strongest sorcerer in history and the one who took down Gojo and even the legendary Jujutsu sorcerers of the Golden Age. While legends called him the imaginary demon of the Heian era, the truth is that he was actually a human sorcerer known as the Disgraced One or the Fallen. After his death, Sukuna transformed into a cursed object. Specifically, his 20 indestructible fingers ensure that one day he will reincarnate through a perfect vessel. Sukuna's curse technique makes him one of the deadliest beings ever. His main ability, Shrine, lets him unleash devastating slashes and fire-based attacks. Dismantle is his standard cutting technique, slicing through anything in its path. Cleave adjusts its power based on the toughness and cursed energy of the target. Using Cleave, he even developed Spiderweb, which lets him collapse the ground by shaping his slashes into a web-like formation. Divine Flame is another terrifying ability. With it, Sukuna produces fire so powerful that it surpasses even Jogo's volcanic flames. However, Divine Flame can only be activated after using Dismantle and Cleave. Despite its overwhelming power, it has noticeable weaknesses in both speed and range. Because of this, Sukuna created a binding vow preventing him from using Divine Flame on multiple targets outside his domain. Inside Malevolent Shrine though, almost everything within range is basically fried. After taking over Megami, Sukuna also gained the 10 Shadows technique. With it, he can summon even stronger versions of Megami Shikigami, including Divine Dogs, Max Elephant, Rabbit Escape, and Merged Beast Agito. But his most terrifying summon is Mahoraga. In fact, Sukuna became the first 10 Shadows user to ever tame it successfully. Sukuna is also a master of anti-domain techniques, capable of using both domain amplification and hollow wicker basket. More importantly, he has an overwhelming level of control over his own domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. Unlike traditional domains, Malevolent Shrine doesn't trap its targets inside a barrier. Instead, it manifests in open space with a guaranteed hit area of nearly 200 meters. And within this range, everything is cut by either Dismantle or Cleave. When it comes to weapons, Sukuna wields Kamutoke and Hiten. With these cursed tools, he annihilated the elite Celestial Squad and the Void Generals who served under Fujiwara Hokkei Branch. He also repelled the Abe clan's Deishichen Squad, including Angel, and wiped out the remnants of the Fujiwara clan. Sukuna's insane level of power, especially in his prime, isn't just because of his skills. It's also thanks to his unique body structure. With 4 arms and 2 mouths, he had a massive advantage over other sorcerers. Just think about it, he could keep forming hand signs even while fighting without any trouble at all. But how is that even possible? Well, Sukuna's origins are just as terrifying as his strength. Back in the womb, he consumed his twin brother. It's believed that by absorbing his twin, he underwent some kind of evolution. This is why Yuji's connection to Sukuna runs way deeper than it seems. After Sukuna devoured his twin, the twin's soul left and was wandering aimlessly until Kenjaku got his hands on it. Kenjaku then took advantage of it to create Yuji, making sure he'd be the perfect vessel for Sukuna. But in the end, Sukuna refuses to accept Yuji's pity. He didn't want to live just because Yuji let him. That thought alone was unbearable to him, so he accepted his defeat. Interestingly, in his final moments, there was a rare glimpse of self-reflection. When Mahito claimed Sukuna was driven by revenge against those who scorned him, Sukuna didn't deny it. He even admitted that if he hadn't feared his own curse, he might have chosen a different path. And if there were a next time, maybe, just maybe, he'd walk that path instead. Kokichi Muta, better known as Mechamaru, is a second-year student at Kyoto Jujutsu High and a semi-grade 1 sorcerer. Now, to be clear, Kokichi isn't a special grade, but trust me, this guy had the potential to be one. And we'll explain why in a bit. Kokichi was born with a severe condition due to his heavenly restriction. His body was weak and sickly. His right arm and both legs below the knees were completely useless, and he had no feeling below his waist. His skin was so sensitive that even natural light was unbearable, and just feeling the air on his skin was like being stabbed by thousands of tiny needles. But in return, Kokichi gained an incredible power boost. His heavenly restriction gave him an insane amount of cursed energy, which allowed him to control puppets from extreme distances, even across all of Japan. The thing is, Kokichi never wanted this power. If he could trade it all for a healthy body, he would do it without a second thought. Now here's why Kokichi deserves a spot on this list despite not being a special grade. You see, during his battle against Mahito, he was ready to unleash every bit of cursed energy he had stored up over his entire life, 17 years, 5 months, and 6 days worth. Even though it was only temporary, Kenjaku himself admitted that Kokichi's cursed energy output at that moment was on par with a special grade sorcerer. And remember, Kenjaku once said that being a special grade means having enough power to overthrow an entire country alone. Sadly, even with all that strength, Kokichi still fell short in the end. But now that you know every disaster level special grade sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen, you'll love our simple yet detailed breakdown of other series' most broken characters. Wanna see how strong Kaiju No. 8's Defense Force members and Sakamoto Days Order assassins are? Click here to compare them yourself.